Maybe we'll talk about complexity, because obviously they're in this weird scenario now where people have seen the report, and as far as I know, by the way, that is actually accurate. Like, basically, there's a decent chance you just don't see Config playing complexity again. Like, he's either in Astralis or another team, you know, whatever the scenario is, that might be the end. So this lineup you see now, I know people think it's like a stand-in lineup, and then it's like, well, what happened? Like, this might just be complexity. Like, this might actually be the lineup. And now we'll say, this is pretty juicy. There's also rumours maybe some other big name players join complexity. So there's also, it's, you know, it's it at the end, basically, if you're a call fan. But I have to say, my problem is, because I was watching this game of complexity, I have a problem with this team, and I want to get people's thoughts on it, which is like, when you construct a squad, in theory, the old days, you did just get the best players you could, and then you figure it out. Like, yeah, you play this spot, he plays this spot. Remember, in the early days, CS, it wasn't even necessarily fully set roles. Like, in the game, you just move around. If this guy's a beta, he's a beta. If this guy's aggressive, he's aggressive. And you hope it works out, right? In the modern day, where we sort of try and model it like sports, and we have roles, and we have like a concept of how the game works, I have one obvious problem in this team. It goes like this, right? BlameF is a lurking IGL. JKS is a lurking fucking Australian. I don't know where to go with that one. Coldzera is a fucking bait Zera. Like, the problem with this is this. You got 3 fucking betas in this team. And that's before you got to the AWPer. The AWPer! Like, what's he going in first? Like, so I have to say, even though I actually thought what they did at Blast was amazing. Like, what a fucking sick run. It was really cool. They were like mixing it up with the best teams. I don't know about this lineup. It feels like you got sort of too many of one type of player.
Yeah,
they even said it. BlameF even said it in his interview after one of their matches. He said the number of role clashes they have right now is actually really hard to work with.
Oh, fair play that you acknowledged it then, yeah.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I always get the impression that Blame is like a pretty honest dude like that. Okay. And I think, you know, if because, you know, like a lot of the folks who go to Reddit and start immediately typing out their thoughts, like oftentimes you are just wrong. Like a lot of the things that you read there are just horrible. But when even like, you know, the Reddit analysts are like getting in there and saying, mate, everyone on this team just doesn't go in. Like, you know, everyone's just kind of sat back doing nothing. It's like, you know, if they're noticing it, then maybe there actually is a problem. And I am inclined to agree with you. It was super weird because when we saw them just recently, and you know, they had NATO as a stand-in, Poison was actually taking over some of the like entrying duties.
Yes.
And weirdly enough, it actually made Complexity look like pretty good in the sense, like, you know, bear in mind they're playing with a stand-in. They just had S-Tag join. They had like no time to practice. And you have Poison of all people on the roster being the guy to like run in first with an AK and like double entry A-site vertigo, which is just fucking mental, by the way, that he's even the one that like you'd look at. It was him and Blame doing a lot of the entry work, but it actually made them look pretty good, I thought. And like in a fashion that I don't think we're going to get to see with this roster in the iteration it is now. Like, you do have very, very similar players who are all about like working it low and slow and taking their time. And it's like, if you're all lurking, none of you are lurking, you know, like that's kind of the problem. I don't think so many of their rounds just fall apart and start to feel a bit directionless, which is a real problem when you've got someone who is as talented in terms of his leadership and like, you know, doing his research as BlameF. Like, this guy crunches so many, he's the fucking Maui snake of players, mate. He's out there, you know, like doing all these doing all like these hardcore VOD reviews. He's like playing in ESEA refrag and whatnot, you know, like figuring out how to counter specific executes that teams run. And it ends up just feeling a little bit wasted because I feel like you never even see them in the positions to do the stuff they've prepared. You know, like, you don't have that guy to like kick the door in and start the round, and that's like a real problem for me. Also, I just want to say, I think JKS has been kind of underwhelming since he joined this team.
Absolutely.
As sad as that is to say, like, I to join this team and go, fuck, man, look at how good this guy is. It's like everyone said, but mate, he's joined. I don't know what it is, but like the amount of games I have where he just has like 4 kills by the end of it, and you're just kind of sat there going, like, oh baby, no, what happened? Like, it's so uncomfortable, especially Vertigo, man. There's something about JKS on Vertigo. It's so hit and miss. His B-site anchoring, like, he always plays, you know, I call it Tetris, but I don't know what anyone else calls. You know, that little like, as you come up the ramp on the left, on the B-bomb site, there's like that fucking metal grating.
Right.
He always plays over there, and it's gotten to the point now where like teams have set nades when they play versus Complexity, just like triple nade him out of position, and then, oh well, you're in B. And I don't know, man, whenever I think of JKS, I remember this guy who is this unstoppable Aussie force of nature who could, if needed to, just haul, you know, Renegades, 100 Thieves, doesn't matter. He's got the Aussie boys on his back and he's willing to do whatever. And we haven't ever really had that for complexity so far, not consistently at least.
I don't even know if it's just JKS, because I've talked to a couple of other players and they said that Complexity aren't actually a very hard team to read, even despite all of the prep work that they do and all of the actual effort they put into their pregame. So to me, like, I think Coldzera is a bigger addition to this team than just firepower and roles, because he's going to be he already secondary calls a lot. Even if you listen to some of their comms and their matches that they played over the Blast stream, he was already secondary calling or micromanaging some mini situations in mid rounds, and I think that adds a lot more value to this team than JKS as a player. And I think if BlameF transitions to more of an entry role like he did for Blast and did for ESL Pro League when NATO was in there, then the team could possibly work, but just not with JKS. I think they would have to have Cold take over that sort of role and probably bring in another player if they actually want to make moves to go into like a top 5 role.
This is also, though, where, like, when you're from the outside, like we are, we're not in 100 Thieves, and we don't necessarily know, like, all the dynamics of how it works. One of the problems I feel like is if you know that team, they were actually how they were marketed. They were just, like, the most laid-back team of all time. Like, people like Azza and JKS are just mad chill. Like, there's a reason why they just played together forever, basically. But the problem is, I think, personally, is when you're JKS in that team, everyone knows which way their bread is buttered. Like, they all know you're the star player, and basically the first thing they do is give you all your spots, all the resources, and because you usually outperform the others, you never get any of the blame and any of the criticism. In fact, they can lose the game and people go, JKS is really good, though in fact he should be in a better team. Now, if you go and you get the bump up to join a team like Complexity and people know you're on like a massive contract, it's like, this is like supposed to be a power move, remember? That was supposed to take them to the top. That was what was going to put them over the top and make them like elite team or something. Well, when they do that, first of all, the expectations are enormous. And then secondly, it's very different. Everyone going, listen, take whatever you want. Or you having to go and fight for what you want. Like, maybe you want a role or a spot, or you want more resources, but you have to speak up. Like, if you don't someone like Config's not going to wait while you do that. He's just going to say, I'll take that. Or someone, as you say, like BlameF, if it's his team, he's going to say, well, I want to play this spot, because obviously he's quite unique as an IGL in that sense. He's putting himself in a winning position sometimes. And I'll just briefly say, I do have a bit of an issue on the BlameF one, because the problem is, no one ever actually says, I notice, he's like an amazing IGL. Like, no one says, like, oh, Strat's a god tier, or look at the way he read this game. What they say is what Harry said. They go, but he spends so many hours in demos. It's like, yeah, my problem with that is, like, fragging wise, he's killing it. Obviously, he's one of the best IGLs we've ever had for fragging. But when he plays, it does give me trigger like PTSD for when Happy used to play in Envious. Because here's what people don't get. There's an analogy, and it's harsh as fuck, but it's just true if you think about it. Happy, right, once, because you have to understand what was funny was, even though me and him just totally disagreed about the game, we would just like argue about it at after parties over drinks, and just like for 3 hours every time we met. And like, it was just like it was like a chess match we were playing by post. We'd just meet and then resume the chat. Like, well, actually, Existence was doing this better. No, he wasn't. You do not know what the meta was, but and we were just arguing the whole time, right? But one time, right, I was telling him, here's the thing, right? And someone made an analogy I brought to him because it just stuck with me. It's so perfect. Because I used to say to him, I'll tell you one thing, Happy. Even though I disagree with how you play, if you win, I won't criticize it, because if you win, you must have had some read that made sense. Something that you did in the game worked. It was on some level efficient, no matter how much it looked like you were baiting. Maybe baiting works if you do that. Maybe I said, but if you ever stop winning, mate, I said, I'll be right up your ass. Because I'm going to come with the truth. And the problem was this, right? He tried to explain to me that when he did a lurk, because here's the problem, lurking doesn't really mean you're last in line. Lurking means that you're on a different part of the map. And sometimes lurking should be the guy who, by the way, sometimes transforms into the entry if you're doing a quick rotation. Yeah. Or, he comes behind the backstabs, and he means that, like, if you're all going to wrap on A on Dust 2, he comes through the double doors and shoots someone in the back. He doesn't wait for them to cross all the way over and then come and just win the clutch. So Happy did used to sort of like just wait basically the whole time, and then if he killed people, it's because they were just walking past him for free, or he just came and won when 2 people were dead in the site. And someone once explained it to me, and I repeated it, and he had no answer for this at all. This is the checkmate move. I said to him, right, if you're basically off on the side of the map and 4 people on your team go into the bomb site, they take the bomb site, and then you're like killing rotations, you're like hiding somewhere so they have to deal with you. I said, listen, that might sound like you did something, but logically, if the 4 people took the site, if you'd have been there with them, wouldn't it just be more guaranteed they'd take the site? And then he'd also have 5 people on the bomb site with and then he was just basically like, he'd never thought this thought through. He never thought it to that extension, right? And he just had nothing. It was like checkmate. I was like, there you go. peace, I'm out, motherfucker, now give me a cider. Like, you know, I just rizzle-dizzled out there. Like, I actually had got him, I was inside his head. I was like the Matrix, you know. It was like when Morpheus, they're telling him, he's like, the human race is a virus, it's fucking disgusting. You look at you fucking make me sick. Like, it was like that, I was just broke his mind completely. I was in his fucking mind palace. So it was unreal. So basically, that's my problem with BlameF. It's like, I think his actual skills are mega, but I think sometimes, if I'll agree, he did look like he played differently at Blast, but sometimes it's like, I think just too passive, you know, like, because as you're saying, if people are saying they're easy to read, that means they also know where you are, dude, and they're just going to avoid you or whatever, you know.
I mean, to add to that, he's also, like you said, his skill individually is actually exceptional. He plays a lot, he DMs a lot. I don't understand why his role is to shoot people in the back. It makes little sense especially when you have players like JKS, Cold, who can fill that role already. It doesn't really make sense to not be part of the 3 entry pack for me, for someone like BlameF, especially if he has a read for where they're going.
Yes.
So one of the things I've always thought about with Cole, especially like in the last year and a bit, and you know, this is maybe leaning deep into my armchair psychologist, you know, position, but it is just that, like, with how many hardships and setbacks that this team has faced, I can't imagine that for the incumbent players who have been there for a while, that you're like, especially looking at someone like JKS, who, like, bear in mind, is obviously away from home, like stuck out here, has been
very terrible circumstances
years now, right? And it's like, on top of that, well, look at what this team went through. Like, Poison was out for fucking ages with his injury, so they were just fielding standing after standing after standing. Then it's like, you know, then they had the whole Oboe situation as well, where he left because he couldn't, like, you know, deal with the pressures of being away from home, and it just feels. And then obviously Config sustained his injury, like, and it's just like, what the fuck is happening to this team? Like, who have they pissed off upstairs to, like, to invoke this almost godlike hatred of the team, that, like, finally when they get everyone together and they're going, all right, boys, this is it, this is our event, this is what we've been waiting for, Poison's back in, JKS is smiling, nothing can go wrong, then they get the call from Config and, like, A&E, like, boys, I've broken my wrist, and it's like, fucking great, man. Like, and I think, you know, for some of these guys, that really must start to hurt the morale, right? Like, especially with what we say about BlameF, where he does put all this work in. It's like, imagine you're doing all that, you're coming up with, like, specific stuff and responses for every individual, and then, next event, well, they're out, actually, and we have to play with the standing, and we have 2 days to get NATO Sapphics ready and in the server. Like, I don't know, man. A part of me starts to wonder, like, for people like JKS, are they just a bit out of it? Like, in the sense that, you know, your mind just isn't in the right place because you've always had these horrible caveats with every event that you've tried to attend as the team.
One thing as well. Go on.
I was just going to say, same interview, BlameF said that he's had to have, like, I think 5 or 6 3-hour-long conversations each time they add a new player and have to swap out. Like, Peacemaker, NATO Sapphics, Coldzera, JKS, every single time one of these players was added, he had to sit there in a private server for 3+ hours each day just teaching these players their own system, their whatever they're running, etc. So, I don't know. I feel like that's almost an excuse on JKS's part if that's the case, because I think if everybody else on the team is putting in that effort to try and catch everybody up on it, then you sort of have to work with what you have, right? In that scenario, you're going to have to deal with those issues up until they resolve. So saying that it's sort of being complicit and complacent in it isn't really a fair enough excuse for what these players are getting paid.
100%, but I don't know. I just maybe this is because I'm, you know, someone who's very prone to having lapses in mental health, shall we say? Like, I just look at it from the perspective of, like, maybe, you know, you're prepared to deal with, like, the first few setbacks and, like, the first few knocks, and every single time, you know, like, you're trying to dust yourself off and then make it happen. But then it is just it just feels like, you know, you've done that so many times, and also you're doing all of this while you know, you haven't seen your own family for, like, years, and like, all this is happening, and, like, online everyone's going, oh, fucking JKS should just die. It's like, great, okay, like, you know, that's what you get to see when you go online. I do kind of feel for them, because like, do you remember when this team was like first formed, back when you had like Rush and Oboe back in it, and they show up to Blast in London, and they look like shit hot. They went on like this run of like, everyone was going, oh my god, like this Complexity squad looks legit. And if you remember, like BlameF had come in and had like this super high salary as well, which considering his experience at the time, it was like, fuck, that's a big move to have gone for that. And it looked like this team was going to be so exciting, and then it just, it just kind of crumbled. Like, it all started with the Poison injury into the Oboe dropping out. It feels like that really hurt the team because that kind of came out of left field. It felt like, like he just left just before playoffs, I'm pretty sure, right? So it was like, it was a whole thing where I do genuinely wonder if like this team do need like the reset of like what they've done now, where they've brought in a bunch of new faces to try and like build a brand new roster. But even losing someone like Config, like how the fuck do you replace a Config? Like that's not a player you can just go, oh yeah, there's loads of guys just like him. It's like, no, he's part of a very select breed of people.
The worst thing is as well, the other name they brought in, ErikHillestad, because everyone just only cares about Coldzera joining the team. It's like, this guy gets no hype at all. I think he's actually been playing arguably the best relative to his role in the team. Like, he looked like he instantly slot in and just immediately was like doing a good job. Because everyone obviously was still crying about Rush leaving, right? Because it was like nostalgia, and also he's a great guy, and he puts in the hours. The problem with this is these are all secondary and third reason. It's the first thing he didn't say is he's fucking sick of the game. You start with that if they're really good. It's like going, oh, look, she's got a really nice personality, she can cook, and that, like, motherfucker, you'd have said something like, come on. Why would that be the first thing you'd tell me? I don't know about this blind date, mate.
Yeah.
I don't know about this. So all I'm saying is this, right? ErikHillestad, I feel like, is still unfortunately feeling the effect of being in Cloud9. But I always said, if anything, he was one of the people who did his fucking job in Cloud9. The one problem I had with ErikHillestad at Cloud9 was this. Obviously, you can't pay him like $40,000 a fucking month, can you? Like, if I know that information, I can't delete that from my brain. So then when I see him just play as like a support player or whatever, I'm just thinking the whole time in my brain, so basically that should be like Nico device calls it. Like, this doesn't make any sense. So I think, unfortunately, that made people, because that was the angle to laugh at ErikHillestad. He never played bad in Cloud. You just laughed at that angle of like, wow, you wasted all this money on this guy. So I feel like coming into Complexity, people are forgetting he's playing like, he's like a fucking, an entry and a support, basically, depending on what the map is. Like, definitely with those players we described before who take all the space, he's basically there to fill in the gaps. And I actually think he's like here's the thing, he is like a journeyman. He's never going to be a star player, but you look at his career, he's just a very solid player. Yeah, just a really solid player, isn't he?
I look at ErikHillestad, man, as like a glue almost. Like even looking back to like his really early heroic days, like he was in and out of that team a fair bit, and it was always like he would come back in and it would be like, oh well, we don't really have like an AWPer right now, so you're gonna AWP, and he would just adapt, he would just do it, and he would do it well, like, and that's kind of like a rare quality, I think, because a lot of players have like their defined idea as to how they want to play the game. Even looking back to, and obviously IGLs maybe have like more opinions here, but like even looking back to what you were saying with Happy, when like you and him would argue about like how you guys viewed the game, I think a lot of players have their view on what they want to do, and like a team will work well if a bunch of guys who have similar visions come together and make something. But the thing that's great about ErikHillestad is it feels like he can play any style of CS, and he's just a very pliable player, where it's like, if you need someone who can do this, even if he can't do it right away, like he will put the time in to get just as good as the next guy in something that maybe he isn't comfortable in. Like, we've seen this guy AWP, we've seen him secondary AWP, like it's kind of, and then like he was a support player as well. He's kind of done it all, and I have monumental support for ErikHillestad. I really loved him even when he was like in and out of heroic, because it just felt like he never really got to do what he wanted to do in that team, right? Like he was just kind of treated as like and I mean like early heroic here, like he was almost like kind of the spare part of the team, like how like NATO gets called up as a sub and they just plug and play him however they want. That's kind of almost what it felt like ErikHillestad was, with like his exit coming back in. But that's why I was hoping that when he went to Cloud9, especially after showing off in like the Astralis team when he joined, that was going to be like the chance for ErikHillestad to be like this brand player. But obviously then Cloud9 fell apart, and like you say, when you know how much he's earning, when you know how much they paid for him, suddenly you're judged through like this incredibly harsh lens, which, being real, like if this was like, if you didn't know his salary, and if you didn't know, if it was on a lesser team, he wouldn't have faced the same scrutiny at all, really. Like,
want to see more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, be a pleb and don't.